All right.
Yes, sir. I think I'm ready.
All right. Hey guys, happy Friday! I got Chalres Al Bawi here. He's an active guy in politics and community and stuff going on here in Knoxville. You may remember I had him on a little while back when I had Eric Wader on. We had a Nats discussion, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, some other things that are going on here locally. There's, it's the best part about this concept of podcasts is that there's always plenty of content for me to get into, and so we're going to go from there. Just a non-full sponsorship, but just a quick tag here for our friends at Union Jacks and eVape West. July 10th, they're doing the Fourth Creek Brewers Festival. The whole pitch on that is that every brewery that's going to be there part of the festival, all their water starts with KUB, so they're right here in Knoxville, Knox County brewers only. So if you haven't had the chance to get on the other side of town, whichever side of town you're on, and try some of the brewers, this will be a good opportunity to get a good chance to the different mix and the different options we have here at Knoxville. So anyway, we're Almost in Agreement at gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, almostinagreement.com. All the episodes are there. Favorite podcast provider, like, share, all those things. Help us out. Let us spread the word. Charles, thanks for coming out today, buddy. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I enjoy it.
Good. Okay, so I don't know. Like I said, I guess in full disclosure, because I'm an idiot and I know it, and I'm happy to announce my idiocy. I found an old picture from when you were running for city council back in, I guess, 2017, and that's when I reached out. I was like, hey, I want to talk to you as a candidate, and then you corrected me because it was very clear on the picture that it was not this time around, but doesn't matter. I think there's still interesting stuff that we can talk about that's important to keep a conversation going on. One of the ones, as mentioned in the intro, I had you back on here last time with Eric, and we were from the Nats group. So what's the latest on the petition and the things going on within that as far as that side of the conversation as far as the stadium project goes?
I mean, the stadium is an interesting issue for a lot of reasons. The economic impact, the potential for the community to be involved in the process, the diverse group of voices that have been involved in speaking out against public funding, against the building of the stadium, and what would make it a more successful project for the community.
Okay.
I think the overall theme in this is that I've heard from many groups is that it's just about public input, and I think Mr. Boyd and the developers and the local government, I think they agree with that. They've invited the Fort Wayne group. They discussed what made their stadium successful, and it was about getting the community involved in the discussion. I think that's something we haven't seen enough of at this point.
Okay.
There's been community discussion in some ways, but not in direct interactions with Mr. Boyd, the developers, the local government, and a question and answer session through public forum. Okay. I think that's really what's important, what we would like to see. And that's, I don't want to talk too much at once. I want to leave it open for questions for you.
Oh no, I mean people hear me talk all the time. They don't need more of me. That's the point of this. And so it's like, I mean, if anything, it's me getting to ask questions on what I get out of it, more than anything else. So this is my show with you on it, and you're more important than me. So have at it as far as conversationally. If there's stuff that you don't think is getting chatted about, I'm more than happy to be the platform for you to get some of the points out. Because, I'm thinking maybe a little later this summer, I'm going to try to get Mammoth, Welch, and Caldwell back in. I did get the opportunity to do a show with all three of them a few months back that kind of helped clarify some of the framework for my end of it, trying to understand what's going on. Because I think, at least for me, being on this far into town, I'm not a city resident. The financing was a bigger question to me. After talking to you and some of the, I had McKinsey on, and I had Harper on, and talking to them about some of the people that are more directly impacted locally by it. I have kind of expanded my needs and wants, or at least conversationally, out of what's going on, to see some of the things that people are asking for and whether or not there's any reciprocation in conversation, any of that kind of stuff. But for me, it was always a finance thing. I was trying to understand the financing, how much of our tax dollars, where the tax money is going from, what we're not spending money on because we're spending it on this. And so I got a good chance to talk to Mamatoff and Caldwell and Welch about that part of it. And then the state threw in their curveball and changed the way the state's going to pitch in. So that kind of changed it a little bit. But I feel like I have a good understanding of the tax portion of it, to the extent that it doesn't seem to me like the tax burden is going to be very huge, as long as the community's down with it. Because I think Scott from Compass put it best when I had him on and we were chatting about it. He's like, it's really a conversation on the money's not as big of the numbers that float around are. The money's not that big a deal. It's more going to be about whether we as a community want it and are going to support it. And so that brings more of what you and I talked about last time you were here onto the table. Because again, it still feels to me like it's an inevitable. I don't know if maybe I'm missing somebody. I know Amelia's been pretty vocal about getting some stuff at least on the table for conversation, but for most of the different candidates and in-office people that I've talked to, it kind of feels like I can't find a thing that anybody has an absolute no to yet, I guess is the best way for me to put it. But so again, last time we talked about community involvement kind of stuff. Has there been anything that you've heard, any progress that you've made, any conversations that have actually had on it?
Yes, we've had a number of conversations with dozens, scores of groups on a regular basis, interacting with people who are involved in so many other issues in the community. I think this has been an excellent opportunity for the community to come together and to learn how to engage the government in a way that they can see the impact that they're having.
Okay, and so when you say groups, so these are community groups, or are they getting together and actually talking to government bodies, whether it's McKinsey or the mayor's office or anything like that, or is this more like a community summons where it's just everybody kind of talking together, or both?
So it's a mixture of both. We've had opportunities to have discussions with government officials, developers. We've had opportunities to discuss amongst ourselves and to engage in social media efforts in the public, and also just how to lobby the government on this specific issue and how to make the most of impact with what we have, with the resources we have available. So we're a few groups that have our own specific focuses.
Okay.
Right? And we have to take time out of our day to redirect our efforts for this specific thing. The baseball stadium.
I understand.
And we have been able to do that in a very meaningful way. I think it all started with the equity resolution for the $100 million for the African American community.
Right.
You mentioned the impact of the money, the financial, that some say it's not that big a deal. It's not that big of a burden. Well, if $65 million isn't that big of a burden to commit for a baseball stadium, then how big of a burden is it for you to commit $100 million over a span of 10 years to an entire community, right, that has been systemically impacted through different government programs, policies.
Right. One of the things that, for me personally, that kind of, I can't remember who, somebody else's podcast I was listening to, and as far as like poverty levels go in a community and a direct impact of old racist actions that have true and quantifiable effects today is homeownership. And the I can't remember what the numbers are, but the majority of Americans, their largest asset is their home. And so when you have a generation or two back where homes were taken and it doesn't pass through the family over the generations, that is the home ownership being one of the highest personal wealth things that families have, and then when you lose that in it kicks you back multiple generations. And so we're 2 generations from when it happened, but there's families now that are directly impacted from that because they didn't get that wealth growth generationally. And that's something that I hadn't considered personally in this in the broader conversation, not just the baseball one, obviously, that I didn't realize until it was explained to me through whatever podcast I was into on that one. So that is a big one there for sure. And that's something that's interesting to me because we talk about it a lot, and I'm curious, and again, I use District 6 because I know that's where you ran, and I know that's where you live. Is there I wouldn't hold you to it if you don't know the answer, but is there a stat on percentage of homeownership versus rentals?
So I do. I hate to do it, but I do need to correct you. It was the 5th district.
I'm sorry. No, please do. Yeah.
But I do, and it was 2019. You mentioned 2017 earlier.
The important part is I was wrong today. It's just, and then I'm wrong again on top of my wrongs. Jeez.
No. It's fine, and I wouldn't usually it's not too important to this particular conversation. I don't know the stats. What I do know is I live in Lonsdale. There are a significant portion of renters there. I've seen the change that's taken place from when I grew up in Knoxville even 10 years ago. And it's not just East Knoxville that's seeing this change. It's West Knoxville as well. When I was in Carnes, all the way up till I graduated high school, there was a significant portion of farmland there.
Right.
And now it's been developed, and they put these cookie cutter houses for $250,000 subdivisions on it.
Right.
And that we have East Knoxville, the Park Ridge community, steadily being changed. I could call it gentrification, but for lack of a better word, you just see the demographics changing. Right.
And so I guess to me, why I go into that whole kind of spiel on, the redlining of the past and taking that, the generational home ownership out of the question, is that I think the more I think about it, the less specifically damaging to a community gentrification would be if it's ownership that's getting sold to other people that are coming in and changing it, because at least you take that wealth with you. But when it's a rental and a landlord's giving you the boot because somebody else comes in to develop it up, and then rental rates go up or they sell it to the new owner, I think that's why I've been trying to get some data on this issue, is how much ownership are we talking about, or how much is rental? Because to me, I get the premise of gentrification and why it's a problem, but to me, the more I think about it, the more it's specifically a problem when it comes to rental people that are renting their residence, because they're not taking that wealth with them when a property gets bought and then brought up, and then it gets developed out of price range and that kind of stuff. And so I think that's one of the things that this is me, my old ignorance, trying to understand as I move forward. Is I think that's one of the main issues, is that we don't have a lot of home ownership. And I guess to me, is there any conversation about that being a step to try to fix, or maybe not fix isn't the right word, but trying to me, that's a logical progression, is how do we get more people owning their residences moving forward?
And I think that's an ongoing conversation that's taking place. I think, I don't want to dig too deep into the conversation due to my lack of knowledge. What I will say is, I have seen several families who, particularly elderly individuals, they're on a fixed income, Social Security, disability, and there's progress that's happening in the community. The houses are being built and developed, and with that, the property tax rates are going up, right? And as those rates go up, when you're on a fixed income, that income is not increasing.
Right.
So your ability to pay the property taxes gets less and less as they increase over this period of time, and then you have the property tax auctions. And
right.
I have seen several occasions where somebody who has had their home for generations, for over 60 years, where it was taken from them because of that very scenario.
Right.
The property taxes were increased. They couldn't keep it up. I think it's 2 years. They couldn't make the payments they needed to do. They had an auction, and so the loss of generational wealth is that's where it's happening.
Right, for sure.
And then, like you mentioned, rents, as these people come in and they develop, then once the old leases are up, they can give a new rate, a higher rate,
right,
due to what's happening on the outskirts.
Right, and then even as a landlord will start spending more money on making a nicer place because he can get more value out of it, because the demographics are changing in that community, and it seems to be more affluent. And I get the shell game for the landlord, and there's gross parts and good parts at the same time, but right, and that's one of the tax one's the one that I think is the harder, broader conversation to have, because at the same time it's like, one of the things we're having, I at least my perception of one of the issues the city is having is the city is outspending their income, and it didn't happen this year, but it is likely within the next couple of years. The city is going to be raising property tax fairly soon, regardless of property values going up.
Well, what I will say, and I want to bring it back to the
Sure.
stadium here,
Do,
is
yes.
the stadium can be used as an opportunity for the property tax appraisers
Right.
to reassess values in East Knoxville and to increase the property tax values. And while that is good for some people, if those that own their home and they can afford it, they have an income, they have savings to be able to match that, that's a great thing. But for those on fixed income, when that happens, then there's difficulty, there's more financial stress that comes with that.
100%.
And so even without actually increasing the property tax rate, that property assessor, that can make a huge impact on communities that are on the borderline.
Right.
So
I get you.
whether I think the difference between working class and middle class is semantics. It's just how you identify. Some people think of themselves as working class. Some of them think as middle class. And I think the difference is that the people that think of themselves as middle class they don't want to deny what they have, right? How hard that they've worked for it,
right?
What I will call the blessings or just the value in it, right? While the working class, they may see that there's value in it, but it's just no matter how hard I work, I'm not getting to that next level where I'm the economic elite, where I can have in-ground pools, where I can live on acres, and where I have a secluded house in a secluded subdivision, right, where I'm getting all the advantages of a certain system that's been put in place. And I think that is the one of the biggest problems that we're dealing with, because so long as we see each other as we see them as different and not the same, then it allows us to be divided on these class issues that
right.
are really impacting us. So we have this issue where $65 million is being given to one person and his developer friends versus $100 million to those who have been directly impacted by these systematic policies that have meant to that have, whether they've meant to or it's incidental, they have increased the wealth gap, right, between the middle class and the rich. And I think that's the biggest problem that we have, is that some people think of themselves as middle class and they disconnect themselves from those who are
right, working class, which for all intents and purposes
are the same
is more or less the same thing. It's just a perspective. I feel like I'm good to be where I'm at, so I'm proud of it and I'm good and blah 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 blah, where the same exact person with a little bit different perspective is just like, I'm just not quite to the next level where I can be a little bit more comfortable, where I can take a little bit more leisure in my life, where instead of it always being the grind.
And I think the problem that creates is in politics, in the political process, and how we vote. So we see people, they say, oh, we don't need handouts. And the people who identify as middle class is like, yeah, we don't need handouts. And even though they're missing the full picture, right? Let's take food stamps, for example. Food stamps aren't exactly a handout for the family. Like, you get $200-$300 a month. Maybe you get $500 a month to feed a family of 6, right? That's not a whole lot of money.
Nope.
But what you really get is you have these corporations that sell these snack foods, that sell Pepsi products, Coke, all these food industries, the agriculture industry, the agribusiness, that they are the ones being propped up with billions of dollars in subsidies that go through public choice. So instead of just having the government go up and buy like all of these, whatever, a bunch of cow and cheese and giving it to the people, what you have is you have the government saying, okay, people, you get to choose what you want to eat for this month. Here's a little bit. And then this is used to prop up the agriculture industry.
I fully follow, but at the same time, I don't, like, I've made the joke and maybe a poor joke at best of like, well, if I'm working and I'm paying into the system and that system is then turning around and buying food stamps for you, then I should get to pick what you eat. But I don't know if that was always, I never truly meant that as an actual stance or anything, but it was always kind of one of those, because I agree. I think it's weird that you could go get food stamps and you could buy a Pepsi and you can buy Oreos, and you can buy kind of stuff like that. But at the same time, I lean much more libertarian, and it's like, you do you want to eat. If that's how you want to eat, that's how you want to eat. And so that's I follow your logic on it, especially on the other side of it too, in the big agriculture side of it too. It gets a real sketchy on like, hey, we're going to pay you to not grow this year. And all the different subsidies that farmers, the big farmers, get for some of the games that they can play on that side. I'm not disagreeing that there are serious problems with the system as it sits, but I can't not push back a little bit on the idea of the government getting to choose what you get to eat because you're in a situation where you need help.
Well, first off, the government used to choose. They used to have like
Right.
government branded block cheese.
Yeah, I remember that.
But I really think that was just an example of how when we get these things they use it in the media to propose that it's really a benefit that it's poor taking advantage of, they're going and buying Pepsi and Oreos. Who cares if they buy
Right.
Pepsi and Oreos? Because who works for Pepsi and who's getting that benefit? It's the people who work there that gives them a job. So if I'm buying Pepsi and Oreos, that keeps Pepsi and Nabisco
Right.
in business. And if I don't, well, then that's a lot of money they're not getting out on if the
Right.
government's not giving me those food stamps.
So I guess what you're getting around to is that some of the food stamp business is kind of a long con for the big corporations.
I'm not going
to
to
keep
call
going.
it. I'm not going to call it a con. I'm thinking it's a necessary part of the process in order to keep things even out. So
Okay.
we make sure people eat and we make sure businesses stay in place.
Okay.
Right. And to bring this all back, we condemn somebody for taking food stamps, but we don't have the same wherewithal when it comes to the baseball stadium. Right? We're giving one man $65 million, all in the name so that he can make a small profit. The $65 million is meant so he can make profit on this, so he can run it.
For sure.
And then, there's this ideal that it will trickle down, that it will be a benefit for the whole community. Right? But we don't see it the same way when it definitely is a benefit for the whole community when the families get food stamps. You see the logic there.
Yeah.
Now, what I will say is that if we're so far into this baseball stadium thing, and what I really want to say is that the amazing work that's been done by so many people to advocate against public funding or for a community benefits agreement has had an impact. We've seen that. So if Mr. Boyd wanted to put money towards playgrounds and Tuskegee Airmen and the 15% subcontractors and contractors to the disadvantaged businesses, I mean, he could have done that at the very beginning, but he didn't. And I think the fact that he didn't and he's doing it now shows the impact that we're having on this conversation.
Right.
And the fact that it's steadily increasing. Every news cycle, it seems, there's a new announcement being made. The last one is, they mentioned Jackie's Dream possibly coming to the stadium. They mentioned a Boyd's Jig and Reel coming there and serving thing. That's a big deal. And then we have people advocating for cost of living wages that are connected to the cost of living, right? If you're creating these jobs, maybe hundreds. I think the number that they were hiring this past year was 130, all in the food service industry. Let's make sure, and they're all temporary, right? Because if you're working in this baseball stadium,
Right.
it's
It's
only
not like 5 days a week. It's a couple here, a couple weeks this week, and then over the summer you're going to be working 6 days a week, and then come fall you might work 2 or 3. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
It's supplemental income at best. But if we're going to do it, let's make it an opportunity for those who are working it to get a living wage commensurate with the cost of living in Knox County. I think it's over $15.52 an hour, and that was from 2016 data. Some people have asked for $22 an hour, which isn't completely unreasonable when we're talking about seasonal work. What I would like to add to that is that if you're going to hire these people, let's give them an opportunity to have an option for a job for the full year. So you get hired in for the seasonal work, but let's have a place for them to go during the off season to make sure that they keep getting paid. I think that's important. But these are the small things that we can continue to have an impact in as we discuss the baseball stadium. We've already had an impact when it comes to discussing it in connection with the equity resolution. He's partnered with the Beck Cultural Center for, I think, a history museum on the baseball stadium and then the black community in Knoxville and the impact urban removal has had on our community. And the Urban League for the quotas for the contractors and subcontractors and vendors You know, all of this is important. I think it goes to developing our culture. Like if we have a practice, right, where we just do whatever we want, you know, that can be good, right? It can work out to the benefit of everybody. But what happens is certain groups get overlooked. And by having people advocate, say, let's not overlook key groups, let's not overlook the black community. They're going to be impacted by this, right? They have been historically impacted when these decisions have happened, when these developments have occurred. They have been the ones that get the short end of the stick, so to speak. They're the ones that get removed. They're the ones that get the low-paying jobs. They're the first ones to get fired, right? And the last ones to get rehired. Whenever these things happen, they get their house that they've lived in for generations. They get it purchased for $40,000 from them, and that seems like a big deal to them when they get that offer. But then that same house gets developed for a few $20,000-$40,000 fixed up, and then it sells for $250,000. Right. That's a missed economic opportunity for them. Like, there's no reason that they couldn't have got a piece of that. But because somebody wants to make a whole lot of money and not share it, this is what happens. So all we have an amazing and a talented group of people in this community, of organizations who are constantly working on this. And all we're doing is advocating, asking to be heard, and to make sure that everybody's voice is welcome and understood. Like, it's not that difficult, right? If you're going to go into a community and say, we're going to redesign this whole thing, we're just going to change it all up. This was here, and now we're going to turn it to something different. And this is what I want it to be. Like, okay, like I get that that's what you want it to be. It's your land to some extent. That's fine, right? But now you're asking for public money for it. Right. Let's just have a conversation.
Right. I agree with that for sure.
An open conversation.
Right.
Like, not one where we cut off question and answers. Not one where we have a sudden stop time that wasn't announced during the meetings, right? Not one where it's allies of organizations that you are on the board with, essentially advertising for your stadium, not having a discussion. Like, look, there's pros and cons with everything, right?
And from the beginning, to like even for me personally, and I know it's been in the works, and it's been conversated behind the scenes, and people that have been in the know have known about it since Boyd bought the team. But for me, it really felt like, it was announced that he wants to do this, and then like from that moment, it was like, this is going to happen. And then it was all about the little do's and don'ts, and the details were to be sussed out, and how exactly it was going to get financed and stuff like that. And I'm super excited that you feel like you guys have gotten some good traction on it, because, I mean, that was a fear of mine, that it was just inevitable. Period. Done. End of story. And so that the fact that you've gotten some traction and gotten at least some conversations to be had, and some ears listening, and some effort put forth to the requests of the community, I think is important. I think that's something to be proud of.
And I think something that I'm probably most proud of in all of this is just proud of the community. Not proud of what I did, but proud of the community. We've had a diverse perspective of groups. We've had conservative, libertarian, progressive, liberal groups of all kinds.
Yeah, you and Eric partnered up. That doesn't seem very logical to me on the standard political sphere of things.
And that's the beautiful thing about this, that we,
and that's exactly, because when I had you guys on first, I didn't really quite understand the history of you guys individually and what you guys kind of do normally, and kind of like that stuff, and it didn't hit me until after I had you guys on how truly different you guys kind of really are background wise, and where you're from in town, and what your political movements and kind of things are. And then it's like that is how things are supposed to be. That is how our government is supposed to work, is we have two very politically different people that have a unified goal, and there's a particular issue that they're on the same side of, even though maybe every other single issue on the planet you guys can't agree even to talk about, but we have this one, and so we will work together on it. And that gives me hope for the future, because I'm a big negative Nancy on how terrible politics is getting as a game, how this two-sided coin really is just one flat surface, and it's the two sides that really work together to ignore me, is my opinion on it. But anyway, and that it's really all about the fight and all that kind of stuff, and it's all about whatever we can get most aggravated about to get the most voter turnout. Not really about making any change. Not really about doing anything for a future good or anything like that. It's really just power plays of the two. But then to see this particular issue and the Nats thing and what you guys have done with that is exciting. Like I think it's neat. It's one of those things that I felt like probably couldn't exist anymore, and I get to see an example of it. So that makes me happy.
And I will say, like, just based on our ability, not just with Nats, but so many other groups, our ability to have this conversation leads to conversation on other issues we may not have discussed before.
Right.
Right. So we're able to connect it to, what's the housing crisis? What's happening there?
Right.
Right. What can we do to help people who are living in that area? What can we do to help the people living in Austin homes? Or what's the service industry going through? What are their workers going through? What can we do as a community to help them? We may disagree philosophically, right? But what action steps can we agree on?
Right.
To have an impact on these issues? And I think this has allowed us to open up those conversations where they wouldn't have been opened up before.
Yeah, and that exactly. And I think that is an important little subplot to what's happening here that I think needs to be celebrated, because I think it's I think it's one of those that, like I sit and watch back in the baseball stadium. Actually, the best example was the Kincannon removing the police from schools situation, which was such a it was just such a, what's the word I'm looking for here? It was so poorly represented by both mayors on what was actually happening in the political format of it. It's just this is a way for me to make that mayor look bad because that mayor's on the other team and that kind of thing. And like, so with such a perfect example of how bad the system can act in order to play its game, to see the inverse of it. I mean, again, like I couldn't be more pleased to get to hear about some of the successes you guys have had as far as getting heard and getting things done the way that the community most affected wants.
And I think one of the biggest impacts I've heard, and I've just heard this, it's a rumor going around, is that the yearly lease rate is going up.
Yes, that's been one of my big ones.
That's what I heard, and so that impacts how much of this is a public funding issue and whether it's just a loan.
Yeah.
Right. The loan is preferable than just outright funding it.
Well,
I'm not saying it's great.
Right, and like any good landlord, what you do is you build a property and you rent it, and by the time your mortgage is paid off, what you want to do is you want to rent it for about what you spent on it or about what your mortgage is, and then you have your mortgage paid off and you have this multi-million-dollar piece of land left over at the end that you could sell or continue renting, and then it becomes an actual income source instead of just a break even. Like I've got a couple of friends that actually own a couple of rental properties, and it's like, it's like 2% over mortgage insurance, because it's a special insurance when you're renting and stuff like that. But you want to be as close to break even as possible, because you want to make it as affordable as possible, so that when it's over and you pay the mortgage off, it's now just insurance, and then the rest of it starts to become profit or your next investment or something like that. And that would be my hope long term if this is going to happen, is that this is a well-developed property and we as a community own it, and the city of Knoxville, well, I guess the Sports Authority will own it as a joint operation between the city and county thing, however the semantics of that works. But that whether the Smokies come or go, we still have that piece of property and it's still useful and functional. It can start earning money for the city directly instead of being a cost burden. And so, yeah, that was one of mine. That was always one of mine. The more I looked at the numbers, the more I was like, if that $1 million was the number they kept throwing around, $1 million a year in rent. And I was like, that's not enough. I understand it's going to be less than the mortgage, for lack of a better word, just because of the way this thing works out with the state kicking their portion in or whatever. But I mean, realistically, the mortgage is $4 million a year. And so I wanted it to be half. That was always my argument. It's like, it should be at least 2. And then the state part covers most of it, and then we just have a teeny tiny bit that the city and county have to help cover.
Well, I mean, some of this is semantics. Where's the money for the state?
Right, that's
from?
it. Right.
It's coming, like, instead of creating a special tax zone for it, like they just redirected sales tax that was already collected.
Right, that's true. That's very true. But and again, it's one of those weird isms of the last year we had, is that and I think it was the responsible thing for the state and the local and even the school board to do, is that when we got in pandemic mode, it was trim where we can, and we started trimming budgets. And then the sales tax kept up with with the original budget, not the trim budget. And so to me, this is a spending of some of the overage of last year. Not that we couldn't spend it on better things. I 100% agree with that part. But at the end of the day, what's the state budget? How many $1 billion is the state budget?
I can't answer that question.
But I mean, $13.5 million in a I think it's I want to say it was like a $52 million billion budget.
You know, sometimes it's about the perception, right? So $13 million may not be a lot in the scheme of a $1 billion budget, but what it is, it's a lot to those who haven't been given that same opportunity.
Right.
Mr. Boyd and his developers, they get an opportunity where they know how to work the legislature due to their social network. Like, I can't fault them for it.
Right.
Like, right, if I had $100 million sitting around and I needed an extra $50 million to work this investment out, and I had the connections to have conversations with all these government officials, I'm probably going to have that conversation.
For sure.
And I'm going to ask for that money. I can't fault them.
Right. And there's a track record of other people doing it in the past. I'm like, yeah, just like dude did a couple years ago. It's no big deal.
But that doesn't make it right. And that doesn't mean that the people asking shouldn't be aware of the perception of how it looks and what they can do to improve that, not just for themselves, but the condition of everyone else. Like, if you have higher political ambitions, if you have higher ambitions just for business or going further in baseball, right? There's a way to set a model to create an example for other communities to use in the future. And by interacting with the community, by getting more public input than what has been at this point, it can be a huge difference maker in how you look in the scheme of things, and more importantly, of the final product. How successful will it be?
Right.
If you've asked the community for input and they've given it, and if they felt heard, you're going to get that buy-in that you want, that you're going to sell out the tickets, right? And that's what we want. We want this to be successful.
Right.
We want the community
100%.
to benefit from it. We want the people in East Knoxville to get what they have been long overdue, an economic resurgence.
Yeah.
Like that they had a good economy, they had good businesses, and all that was taken from them. Right? There's no sense not to bring them into this discussion and see what we can do to bring it back to that.
Right.
If not better than before.
Right. And one of the things on that I've been hearing some rumor and some talk about, and especially in the city races thing, is taking some of these standard TIF and pilot programs that we hold for big business and stuff like that, and seeing if we can do a micro versions. Start getting smaller versions of it, because to me, and again, on a fiscally conservative standpoint of it, is if, let's say, I don't know, just random example, whatever this the Andrew Johnson building remodel thing, that whole big long term debacle that is, let's say the TIF's gonna kick out or to help that company with $1 million. I know it's not real numbers, so just say it's $1 million one company. Well, they fail, that's $1 million lost. Well, you take that same $1 million and give it to 20 different companies in a 20th, so 50,000 a piece. Is that the right math? So 50,000 a piece to help them jump over, to help them get that hurdle, to get started, to get that ad revenue, or to get those advertisements in place to let them grow. Of those 20 companies or 100 companies or whatever it is you split that same amount up to, they're not all going to fail. Some might, but you're only going to lose little bits and pieces of it instead of the whole thing if there's a failure. And I like that idea. I don't remember who brought it up. Somebody brought it up when we were talking campaign stuff, as trying to take this focus on only trying to attract big business and put some of those same things that we put into big business, a Regal, the Boyd Stadiums, the sports stadium project, the all those different projects where we spend millions of dollars on these companies to try to attract them, and split that up against a bunch of little businesses to try to get little businesses off the ground that are here and local. Because one of the things to me that drives me most nuts is this: there's the local businesses doesn't do as well, and it's like for me, the local business is because you have the employees of the business, but then the owners. The owners are the important ones, because even if the owners are a little greedy and take more money, they still spend their money here. And so, again, just because it's on topic, the Boyd Sports one, Boyd spends his money here. I would rather invest in a big company as a community that has a local owner that not only his employees, but he personally is going to spend here. And I think that's something that needs to be encouraged, not on the big scale, but on the smaller scale. Is, Walmart's nice. They employ people around here. They pay okay, not great, but they pay and stuff like that. And they do have a lot of employees, and they do a lot of business, and they help people and blah, 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 blah. But we could have, a dozen small general use retailers or something like that where the owner's here, and not 35% of the revenues goes to Arkansas and to the whatever, the Sam Walton and that family of stuff. And so that's one of the things that I think is missing too, is really, and this is a broader world community kind of thing that's happening as we get as more globally economically, that I would like to kind of back up. I'd rather pay a little bit more and buy something from you that you produce here, and then all that money stays here instead of it always going out. I'm just a big fan of that. Anyway, long.
No, I get it. Buy local. I understand your point, but to me it just goes, all of this just goes back in making sure the people are heard, making sure that if there is going to be any money spent, that it is spent to benefit the public and not Mr. Boyd.
Right.
And I think while there is a diverse group of opinions out here, my opinion and the opinion of key groups, I think, is that no public funding should be given. And to that note, there's been talks of a community benefits agreement. What I would propose is, I've heard many people talk about it, and I've heard some concerns about, even amongst the people who talk about it, is it worth trying? Are they going to be receptive to it? What's the use? Like, we have higher priorities right now, instead of trying to get this CBA. And I think if Mr. Boyd is willing, I think he should just put out what he thinks the community benefit agreement should look like. And then the organizations that work in these type of areas would be willing to talk about it at that point. But right. I think he should be the one to first lay that out. But again, at this point, a good portion of the groups that I speak with and many of the people I speak with privately are of the opinion that no public funding should be given. Because again, it goes back to what's happening in the larger scheme of things. It's not about if Mr. Boyd wants to build his stadium, he can build his stadium. There's no problem with that. It's our money. We don't have an opportunity to get this kind of thing.
Right.
We don't get these kind of deals.
If you're spending our money, then we get to talk about it.
Yes.
And it's that simple.
And we have, up to this point, been given the runaround. There's been discussions, and there's been guarantees that we would have the ability to have this conversation and get public input, but that hasn't occurred. It just hasn't occurred. There's been, I think, one meeting in West Knoxville, why was it in West Knoxville? Right. With Mr. Boyd there, I believe, discussing it. The government meetings have all been closed to public forum on the subject. There's been some resolutions, but again...
So has the Sports Authority meetings are closed to the public?
I can't answer that offhand.
Okay.
I did see a report of it. I didn't see any invitations to it. And when I saw the reports of it, I didn't see any people from the public present. And what I did see at that meeting was a signed ball with all of the people there present signed Smokies 2023, right? So that says something about what the Sports Authority is planning to do. And again,
yeah, because I mean that too. I apologize for interrupting, but the appointment of the Sports Authority members was very swift and very quiet, and it was just
without public input.
Right.
Again, there was no public announcement for, hey, let's have people nominated. There was no real discussion about particular individuals, and we can look at the particular individuals and know their connections, right? They may be knowledgeable about the subject, but it's where are they headed? What do they want from all of this? What are they going to say? When they had that meeting and they had the signed baseball, Smokies 2023 at their first meeting, we already know what they want to do. Right. There's no question at that point.
I agree.
They're supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to be listening to the public opinion. They're supposed to care about what the public wants and what the best way to protect the public is. But if you're going on your first meeting with very minimal discussion, without the study being released, without the study being done that they've currently commissioned, right, and before that's even been done, you're saying 2023, that's a problem.
Right.
You haven't been given all of the data available. And even if you've been given the data, some of it, the public hasn't. You have to dig very hard, talk to elected officials, talk to them individually, and chances are they're going to say what politicians do, right? They're going to put their spin on it, with all due respect, and make it seem like it's a good thing, right? Because many of them have received donations from these developers and Mr. Boyd and all of that,
right? And even to give the benefit of the doubt, and that they haven't, but Like one of my biggest things, as I've talked about it with just random people, not on the show's sake of it, but just random people, like there is so little attention to any of the details on how any of it's working. It's like, yeah, I want the Smokies here. It's like, do you understand you're paying for it? What do you mean by that? You know, and it's like, well, if I'm, you know, again, I'll use Kyle Ward just because I'm out here in District 4, you know, if Kyle Ward was to put a survey together or some sort of, you know, District 4, let me know what you think about the baseball stadium, you know, please contact me about it or whatever. I would say that a lot of people would be like a lot of people that I talk to just about my day about it that don't understand any of the details on it to have a real opinion on what they're actually saying yes or no to. And so it'd be like, you know, sure, yeah, I'd love to have the stadium. That'd be great. I'd go down there and do that. Well, are you good with paying for it? Or you know, and those kind of questions don't come part of the conversation. And again, if you're Kyle Ward and you're, or any, you know, not to pick on Kyle Ward at all, but if you're any, you know, elected official and you're considering continuing this path of staying in politics and stuff like that, you have a bunch of your constituency that's on board with it, even though they don't understand it. You're not going to push back against it because they're not going to understand why, because they don't understand why you would. And
it makes it look like you're against jobs. It makes you,
right.
Like it's easy to spin things all kinds of different ways. What I will say is there was a survey done by the Knoxville Association of Realtors.
Yeah, that thing was ridiculous.
No, it was 400 people. We're talking a city of 200,000. We're talking a county of half a million people.
Right. Let's talk about probably the top 3-4 industries that are going to have the most positive effect by this. Realtors are probably high on that list of people that are going to have a very good long-term side effect from something like this going into place. And so while yes, it was a survey of Knoxville taxpayers,
400
only 400 of them, but it was also a survey that was written by people that are going to benefit very strongly by this thing going into place.
There's more than 90,000 voters in the city alone. Right?
You're correct, but
whether they actually vote is a different story. Like, look, but you know, they go from the list of the voters, not whether they voted or not. They chose 400, and then of those 400, how many were in East Knoxville? How many were from Austin Homes? How many were from that surrounding neighborhood?
Right.
How many have had families impacted by urban
renewal?
I
think realistically, they're probably all realtors. There's probably
their organization is huge. Yes,
right. There's probably well over that many that live in Knoxville,
and they definitely all vote.
Right, and it is an accurate statement on there. This is of 400 voters. I mean, we don't know that, but I did look through it and I read through it and some of the questions. And to be fair, it wasn't as leading as I presumed it was going to be, but it was still.
It was confusing.
Right, it was still not as it was. Yeah, because you could simply say, "Are you in favor of putting a baseball stadium downtown?" Yes. Do you understand that this is how it's going to be paid for? That's not how they ask those questions.
Yeah, and then it gets into once they say, well, what about in this event? Then the numbers change a little bit. Then it goes 60-40 split. Once, okay, with this plan, are you in favor of it? Then it's like the strongly opposed and kind of opposed. You know, they get 40% versus the 27 they put just, are you for the baseball stadium moving to Knoxville? Right? And then, you know, that's just... you know, we can do better. Right. All of our organization can do better. I understand why they would do that. Like it suits their interest. They're the ones that are going to be able to come in, get the properties for the low rate, and make their commission off of it. I can't fault them for that. Like that's what they're supposed to do. I'm not saying I agree with it, but
so just spitballing, throwing things out because this is what I do. Build one, put one together, do one through. I mean, I know we got the petition going through Nats. Go to your meetings that you go to where you guys are talking about this and do a 5-question survey, compile it, and present it. I will do my part as best I can. Not that I have a huge audience, but you give me those numbers. I'll be like, look, this is, and it, you know, and we could preface it with the bias that it is, but be like, look, this one says 400 people say yes. This one says 400 people say no. And so obviously it's not the same set of people. So which survey is good? Technically neither. But at least one of them is the neighborhood, and at least one of them is, well, they're both directly impacted, but in the opposite way. So let's discuss it. Let's aggregate these numbers and then see. I mean, just steal their survey. Steal their survey directly and take it out to the people.
No, we can do that. There's no doubt about that. What I will say is in 2019, this was an issue that was discussed. When we canvassed, we talked about it. On our social media posts, we talked about it. When we wrote for the Knoxville Focus, we talked about it. We communicated with many members of the community. Like, we may not have put it in written form, and some of us did. Amelia did do an online survey when she was running for office about the stadium. I don't recall those results offhand, but again, like, it's been done, and it's not that we can certainly do it again, and it may be necessary at this point because of the limited sample size of that survey.
I mean, and the problem, and the problem is, and this is a problem that I have in general, is that who published the survey, the Knoxville Realtors or whatever, but who turns around and puts it out to the public? You know, do we think News Sentinel is going to turn around and put a survey we do back out to the public? Probably not.
Well, I'm not gonna put that on any media. What I will say,
I'll shit all over them.
No, I will say that they have. When I have reached out to them about anything, they have been receptive to me.
Okay.
Like,
good.
Whether it's been WBIR, WATE, WVLT, whether it's the Knoxville News Sentinel, or even the Knoxville Focus, all of them have been receptive to, and the Knoxville Compass, the East Tennessee Enlightener. Like, I've please forgive me if I'm forgetting any media outlets here, almost in agreement. Everyone that I know,
don't count me among them.
I've been able to have a conversation with them, and when I ask for something, if we can get this story done, they're at least willing to discuss how to make it happen.
Okay.
Right? Like,
good. That's good to hear.
So, I mean, I can't fault the media as much as, could things be done more? I mean, of course, but there's so much to talk about at any given point. You can't talk about the stadium 24/7,
right.
And then not everybody's watching TV. And when they do read it, how much are they actually putting into, like, reading an article?
Next to none, right? I agree, and I think that's one of the broad issues that we talk a lot about on the show, and what I'm hopefully accidentally doing in the process. I know a lot of people don't like the longer format that we do, but I think that's one of the things is, like, it's hard. There's too much going on. It's hard to keep up with. I understand why people don't keep up with it. I get it, but I mean, when it comes down to it, there's got to be a point where you've got to make the decision that I need to pay better attention to what's going on around me. I mean, it took me 40 years. I'm turning 40 this year, and a year ago, like, in a joke conversation, I started emailing people running for office in last year's election. And the further I go into it, the more I'm turning into one of these super dorks about it. And it's like, I'm not asking everybody to be super dork about it, but there's a lot going on. And, we could sit and argue about Trump-Biden election and all that kind of stuff, which doesn't do a lot for me and you, or we can talk baseball. Or we can talk, again.
The Knoxville City Council election this year, it's huge.
It's huge, and I'm excited. And again, like, I had Chris Davison, and we talked about it. And traditionally, this cycle is terrible turnout.
Exactly.
And I'm curious to see that because again, and it's neat for me, because I just jumped into it, and it's neat in the sense that we had the largest national election turnout in history last year. And love or hate Trump, it's his fault. He is why we had such a big turnout. Now, does some of that, just a little bit, just a percentage of that newly found interest in politics and governance, roll over to this odd year election that we have coming up? I hope so. I hope we have more people that are more interested in paying more attention and actually care about some of the policies and some of the things that are going on. Because again, for me, I still don't understand how this thing actually works. Forget the election part of it. The actual governing body of the city council and how it works and how its authority lines up with the mayor's office. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that part. Because I think one of the things to me, and I think this is probably to go back to where we started on this particular topic. I think the number one issue for the lay voter, just out there living his life, not paying super close attention to a particular issue, is I think that lay voter, when they do decide they want to get involved, they don't know what their job is. They don't know what a city council does. They don't know what the mayor's office does. They don't know of, like next year, the 22 ballot and the 60-something items for the Knox County ballot that we're going to have. We're going to have clerks. We're going to have judges. We're going to have, I think, the DA's on this one. The public defender's not, he was on the last one. But we've got a lot of stuff coming up on this ballot. And I would say that, again, if we got fun and surveyed people and we went down what's on that ballot and said, okay, we got this district and this seat and this office, what do those people do? What is their actual job? What are they supposed to be doing in that position? And I think that is the broader issue, that if we can get past that point with the general public, then the particular policies is a different conversation. But I think that's the number one issue we have as a local community, as a city, as a county, but as American people at large. We don't know what our government's supposed to do. We don't know what the jobs of these people are. So how do we know, like, what's it matter what they're saying in election cycle? Like, what does it matter? Like, well, I'll do this when I get in office. Like, because to me, that's what drove me way deep down the rabbit hole of this is everybody talks about schools. Everybody does. We're going to do the best blah, blah, blah for schools. And it's like, well, you're running for city council. You have nothing. I mean, really, you have nothing to do with what's going on in our schools.
In some respects, I will disagree. There is the community schools program, and the job is always what you make it.
Right.
And then there's hard power, there's the actual votes, and then there's the budget. But then there's the soft power and the cultural impact you can have by using your position to network and to make things happen. On a wider
And that's
level.
the one that I can't help. I don't like that one. The answer is always it's the whomever has the platform, and it's like, well, if we knew what their job was, then when they platform on something outside of their job, we can go stop. Yes, you could speak on it, but we haven't. Depending on what the situation is, we hopefully have things in place that deal with or bodies that oversee or whatever the specific is, that we can go to the right person to get the right result instead of always going to the county commission when I have a problem, when it's somebody else's thing.
Zoning or school board.
Exactly. And so I think that, again, I think if we had and maybe I'll try to do this, probably not, but if we had a really good understanding of what the jobs are, that'd be a good starting point. And I agree that platform is a thing and it's going to exist. But at least if I could say, well, Roberto is talking about, the trans bathroom bill that the state put on. And it's like, well, he has nothing to do with that. That doesn't affect my opinion of what he should be doing as a city councilor. So I'm not going to use that as a reference for who he is or what he's doing as a city councilor. Yes, it adds context, but I want to hear him talk about how we're going to do, how we're going to handle the growth that the city's looking into, how we're going to handle these different projects that are going on, how we're going to handle the city budget going forward. Those are what I want to hear him talking about. And so when a particular person, and I'm not picking on Roberto specifically, but when a particular person goes outside of their scope, especially for me when I'm interviewing them, it's like, no, bring it back in. I want to talk about what you can and can't do on the position you're seeking, because that's what I want to grade you on, not how you feel about the other stuff that's out there. And I say I want to grade you on as a constituent, not as me personally for the media's sake.
So, I mean, you just talked about a whole lot there.
That's what I do.
And it goes back to voter awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And, when it's, in my experience, right, it's not so much about what you're saying is how you say it. And it's not so much about, it's just, are you relatable?
No, sure.
Like there was, I think, some of they kind of dumb it down and say it's, who would you want to have a beer with?
Uh-huh.
At the end of the day. Like, that's, so what you're like, and to be, if you want to win, you have to be safe, right? So
right,
you don't
sure.
want,
like, okay, because good examples. I like
play to your constituency.
Do you listen to? Have you heard Jimmy Dore? Are you familiar with Jimmy Dore?
No.
He's a comedian, but he's a very progressive podcaster. And he's the type that Nancy Pelosi is a Republican to Jimmy Dore.
Okay.
Right. He's that far on the progressive thing, and so he goes off on. I just lost I had a joke in there. I screwed it up. But he goes off on that safe thing. Like, he's like, like the one I was listening to today, he was talking about how Medicare for all, or even single payer as a federal issue, is the Democrats' version of abortion. It's that all that is something that they dangle out to get you to come vote. They're never going to do anything about it. This is his opinion. I'm not saying it's true or not. But that's his whole thing. And I think that there is truism, maybe not to that particular, but there is truism to that in the way politics work. Is there are certain things that activate base. There are certain things that activate base.
So I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, even in the nonprofit sector, there's a point where how much do you really want to do and how much do you just need to do to fundraise again?
Yes, exactly.
Because it's salaries. Right. Like, if you just solve the issue, then you don't have your organization don't need to exist.
Right. And that's it's a weird spot, and I'm a big fan of trying to make sure we set incentives correctly for different things, whether it's me with my kids, I'm trying to incentivize them to do their homework or whatever, or we as a community or as a government. It's all about incentives, and it's a really weird spot when you put a group together in the government with the incentive to slowly kill themselves. Like, it's a commission on fixing homelessness. Well, if you fix homelessness, you don't have a job. So what you're, I understand that the goal is there, but the incentive for the people doing the goal is a weird spot of trying to balance it so that they can keep existing. Or you take the sheriff's office and his budget. He wants to budget for 420 sheriff's deputies because that's what he wants. And if he goes multiple years at only having 410, he's going to lose that budget. And so he has to keep those on, whether he needs them or not. He has to keep them on to keep his budget. And that game gets funky. And it's just natural. I'm not faulting anybody for it. It's just a funky spot that we end up in because of the way the systems work.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to being forward-looking and being able to not just be a representative and a servant, but also knowing how to lead, right? If you're going to run for these offices, how can you influence the culture in a positive way? I think part of that right now, as you mentioned, the most important piece is education.
Yeah.
Like if you're running for office, it's not so much, or if you're in office, it's not so much about what you think personally, but it's how do you get people to share their thoughts with you,
right?
And how do you make sure that they feel heard, and how do you do it in such a way that you can gather that information to make an informed decision, so when it comes down to this, that not only do you feel that you're making the best decision possible when you have to vote on whatever the issue is, but that the people trust you, that
right.
They understand why you're making that decision.
Right.
They may not agree, but they understand the reason that you've made that particular decision.
Right.
And I think that's really what all we want for the baseball stadium is let's have transparency, let's have a discussion, let's make sure that the people are educated about it, right? It's understandable that people aren't, right? There's so much going on. There's just information overload all the time.
For sure.
Whether it's a school shooting, whether it's murders happen all over the city, whether it's an opioid or meth epidemic, whether it's just World War III about to break out in Palestine and Israel, that's like there's so much going on, and you just think, what does it matter if I vote or not? What does it matter if if my opinion about a baseball stadium? Because really, at the end of the day, I have to pay my bills, and I can barely do that.
Right.
Like I'm living in debt.
Absolutely.
And then that goes back to, what many organizations want is just getting people so where that they can feel safe and that they can have this extra time where they can be educated about these matters and make an informed decision and still have time to enjoy themselves with their family and not be stressed out about what they're going to eat, whether they're going to have their home next month.
Because again, yeah, and I don't know if I could figure out how to agree more with the intent of that, getting that communication in place, getting that want and willingness to take a little bit of time, but not a ton, and get on board with it. Because again, it's just like the way the game works right now. The new crisis is afoot, whatever it is. The new crisis is up. It's murder hornets, it's beef shortages. I can't remember all the ones we had last year. On top of the pandemic part of things, and to reasonably expect anybody to have the time or energy when we're going to go to war with China now, or just all this. They're and as one of my co-hosts likes to say, is it's like there's a constant smoke and mirrors show, and it's just I get, I don't know, I don't we don't need to go down that road. What's going on right now, it's too much. There's too much other getting in the way of real conversations we had, of real just people connecting on how to move forward with their individual lives and how they want to interact with their neighbors as a part of the process. And instead of talking about that, we're figuring out ways to draw lines between groups, and that's what drives me crazy. I hate that.
And I agree with that. But this has been an opportunity for us to kind of remove those lines, to make it not about character assassination, not about stuff that's irrelevant to this, but to make it about how do we make this baseball stadium project understandable to the public. What are the pros and the cons of having public funding, not having public funding?
Right.
What are the alternatives? And what can we do to make a difference? What can we do to have an impact on the discussion? What can we do to make sure that the public is being heard and that they're being treated respectfully?
Right.
And I think we've done a great job of that. Like, there's so many people that have been a part of this process. I don't want to name names because I'll be going for another hour trying to do that. There's so many people.
Good.
They're constantly involved in so many different viewpoints, all of them working hard on this, and they took time away from what their primary focus is, whether it's helping people who are being evicted, whether it's helping people who are wrongfully incarcerated, whether it's helping people in the service industry maintain income when the pandemic shut down their everything. There's so much going on, and they took time out of their day to come together and to work on this. And it says a lot about our community. It says a lot about where we're headed. It says a lot about this election. I think I hope that this baseball issue has allowed us to build the necessary momentum to increase voter turnout.
Yeah.
So that people understand that every small thing, when I say small thing, every particular item on the agenda can have an impact, and it matters, and you can have an impact on it. Right. So, I hate to do this, but, using myself as an example, I'm just one person, right? I had a conversation with a group of people who work on a lot of issues. They mentioned this, and they said, does anybody want to work on it? Right? I raised my hand. I raised my hand back this past fall, and from there I've been able to speak at public forums. I've done multiple media appearances. I've been asked for commentary a lot from different media outlets. I've been invited to discussions at many groups. I've had many phone calls. I've had people walk up to me on the street and just say what a good job I'm doing. Or maybe I disagree with you, but at least we're having the conversation. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. So I just want to say, like, anybody, when you see something wrong, when you see something, whether it's wrong or right, whether you're concerned with it, you think it can be done better, whether you think that there's just a way to improve the condition of our community and the culture surrounding it, you can have an impact. All you got to do is take the initiative and go that next step, right, and start that journey.
Yeah, and I had Jim Clanaris in earlier this week, and his kind of mantra of is if not me, who? If not now, when? And I think that is one of those things. It's like we can't run down this path of somebody else is going to take care of it. Somebody else is more active in it. Somebody else will do it for me. If it's that's, I mean, again, that's the premise of this show, is like, I am incapable of, I'm trying to understand how this thing works. And I don't have a resource that I've been able to find yet other than just talking to people and finding out people that are in it and understand it better than me and talking to them. And, it's like, if I don't, legitimately, like, I knew zero things about my District 18 House race and who the people were. There wasn't information out there. It's like, who are these people? They're running and they're asking for my vote. If I don't ask them, who's gonna? So I did. And now I'm a year and a half later and I can't get enough of it. I'm a junkie. Yeah, well, I love this thing.
And you have politicians, elected officials, people, policymakers watch your show to become more informed. So it says a lot about the impact that you can have when you want to, when you try.
Yeah, and again, and I say it all the time. I have my opinions. I have what I feel is the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I have who I like as a candidate and don't like as a candidate. But that's not what my show's for. I'm not here to promote anybody or to discourage people from voting for anybody. I want people to know what their options are. I want people to know who they're voting for. So District 4 I've completed. I've got everybody from District 4 that I've had in here. I've had a couple other. But, if nothing else, if you're in District 4 and want to know a little bit about McMahon, Ryder, or Clanaris, I've got an episode for you. And I'm going to keep working through it. I've had Harper on. I've had McKinsey on. I still need to get the third one that's running in that seat. I've had Tommy Smith on. I'm trying to get Hayes on, as well as Cruz from that district. I'm trying to get Roberto on, and whoever's running against Roberto. I'm trying to get everybody on. Not that I have a particularly illuminating conversation with them, but at least you get something. And if you just want a little bit of something where you a little bit understand, that's what I'm trying to get to on this show. So that when I thought we were going to talk about 50 different things, we pretty much stayed on baseball the whole time. Is there anything else you want to do before we go?
I mean, just, For those people who don't feel like they know enough to talk about it, or they don't know where to start,
There's nothing wrong with being stupid. I'm your example.
Just ask questions.
Yes,
Like the
exactly.
best lawyers ask the best questions.
Yes.
You want to be a good advocate, just ask the question, because chances are the question you have, somebody else has it.
Mm-hmm.
And it may seem simple. Like, what does a city councilor do?
Yes.
It's like, I mean, I'm sure you could ask somebody on city council and they would hesitate to give you that answer.
You were spot on right. Like, I mean, like, perfect example. Like, I had Massey on, and we were going over some of the stuff that the state had done. And there's like all these phrases, you hear it all the time in the news and stuff. And I was like, hold on, time out. What does going to summer study mean? They talk about this bill went to summer study. And she's like, oh, well, there's a couple of different things, this, that, and the other. And she explained what summer study was. And it's like, I've heard this term a million times. I just didn't know what it meant. And nobody bothered explaining it. So I just figured I'd take a second and ask. Like, I also didn't know, like, again, talking to her, I was like, I can't remember there's a term for it. But when the Senate and the House agree on something and they put it to Lee's desk, if he doesn't sign it within 2 weeks, it goes into law without Lee's signature, without the governor's signature. It's like, I didn't know that was a thing. That's an interesting thing. So I'm glad I know that now. Wouldn't have known that if I wasn't talking about random things like, what does summer study mean? And so, like, I interrupted somebody to ask what, and this was on the baseball stadium one, is service a debt. What does service a debt mean? Like, I asked it, and as soon as it was answered, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. You just pay the freaking bills. I get it. But, to me as a normal person, that's rent or a car payment or my mortgage. That's how normal people talk about it. Service a debt's a weird phrase. And so, like, nobody else had asked it before I did. I'm sure somebody did. But, like, I didn't know that because I'd never asked before. So I had the chance and I asked, and I felt like an idiot. But I know the answer now, so that's that. Moving on. Like, again, that's my joke for the show. Is like, I am as not smart as you are down the street that is barely into politics in Knoxville. I'm just like you, and I'm just willing to be dumb enough to ask it in public, and let people make fun of me for being stupid. I don't care. It doesn't hurt my feelings. So anyway, I tried to ask you if there's anything else. What else? Last things. Anything else that you want to get out while we got the time?
So for the people listening, the people who are involved in the community, they're elected officials, policymakers, or whatever, I would strongly encourage them to start talking with their neighbors, their community members, visiting community organizations. We're having more in-person meetings. There's plenty of opportunities to join on Zoom or whatever the technological app is. Just to get involved, listen to the community, ask them questions, what they think, and see if they have any questions of you, and do your best to explain it, because the voter turnout is too low. What we don't want is anybody to have voter burnout from last year and election burnout and feel like they just don't need to vote.
Right.
We want people to vote. We want people to understand the practical importance of being involved at a local level and the many issues that it has on them, whether it's zoning, whether it's community development, or what have you. I think just get out there and be responsive to the community. I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying we can do more, as much as possible. Just whatever that next step is, just reach out to them, ask them what they think about it, whether it's the baseball stadium, who to vote for in a particular district, explain to them what the candidates do, just be involved. Like, this is the season for that. We have, I think, 2 months until the primary election, and then another 2-3 months for the general. I mean, let's have the largest turnout we've ever had in a local election. That's what I want out of all of this. I think it just goes. That's where we show what our community is made of. When we're involved, when we feel involved, when we're participating, when we're having these discussions in an intelligent manner, in a civil manner, I think that's what creates culture.
Right,
and that's
something to be proud of. Yeah. So I mean, I get to be part of this. I was part of this thing. I helped do this, and whether it goes against what my opinion on it was or not, I still helped move the process forward. I was still part of the thing. It's ours. Act like it.
And I think when you have these conversations, what you will see is that the disenchantment and the frustrations, they'll start to subside, and you'll see that people understand what he just said. Mr. Barber just said that the impact that you're having, that you feel that you've been heard, and that's really it. Just get out there, listen to the people, and you'll see things change. You'll see the culture improved, and Yeah, that's it.
That's it. All right. Do you have anything you want to plug specifically, the Nats page, or anything else that you
Oh,
want
the
to?
city council movement, rescue and restoration. I mean, always, always, all the city council movement candidates. They're having their.
I mean, and for I've had, like I said, I've had Harper and McMahon on. I'm working on Hayes, but you know, it specifically the format that is city elections puts a little bit more pressure on you as a constituent to do some due diligence, because you don't get to lean on the party banners. You actually have to take at least 30 seconds and do a little bit of research on who these candidates are. You know, we all kind of know which party they're involved in anyway, but if you're not paying attention enough to know that much, take 5 seconds, get on their websites, go on their Facebook pages, ask your neighbor about it. The nonpartisanship of this puts a little bit more onus on you, the voter, to put a little bit of effort in. You can't just vote R&D. Not that you should anyway, but you can't do it. They're all just names.
And Knoxville elections are strange in that
They're stupid. I hate the format.
Only the district, only you can vote for your particular district in the primary, and the top two make it out.
Right.
What we've seen in the past is that there has been a tie vote with Amelia, and so that just says every vote matters. And,
for sure.
And to settle that tie vote, this is the kicker here, is that the city council voted on who to move forward as number 2 in that. So every vote prior to that tie vote, every election that led up to those city council officials being on that board, on the council, all of those elections mattered, right? Every single one of them counted.
For sure.
So every vote makes a difference. Every election matters. Just get out there, be involved, be proactive. And if you are in a leadership position, you got to do the same. The responsibility is on you to inform the community of what it needs to know. Just get out there and roll up your sleeves and do the work.
All right. Well, this I'll take my opportunity to put out my notes is that I'm still on the Metro thing. I think we need to, until we get to Metro, we need to change city elections. I don't like the way these city elections work. I think I think the district primary and the citywide general is just, it's gross. I don't like it. It's my district. I should be able to vote for my district. Who my district votes for should win, not who the district across town votes for in my general. Don't like that. Really don't. It's gross, and the history of it's really gross and racist to boot. But it's kind of flipped over the way it's working now. But
we've been able to take advantage of that,
right? And good on you for doing so. I mean, I think you play the game that's in front of you. I'm not mad at that part. I just think this part of the game needs to be fixed. I think if I'm in District 2, then me and my neighbor should vote for my rep in both the primary and the general. But that's a secondary thing. Can't remember what my other stuff I was going to spiel on. So I'm done. You got anything else? Last call for the third time.
City council movement meeting tomorrow at 5:00 at Burlington. Everybody come out and attend. Meet the candidates. Enjoy yourself. It'll be fun.
All right. Well, there you heard it here first, everybody. Well, probably not. You probably heard something else first. You know, I don't know what I'm saying. Like I said, I'm dumb enough to ask the question. So, we're Almost Agreement, almostagreement@gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. You can go to our website, almostagreement.com. You can go there and get all the episodes, or you go to your favorite podcast provider and get us on there. Give 5 stars, reviews, positive, whatever that helps get us out. The algorithms like to share us, the more you share us. So help us out, get the word out. Like I said, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to give you a little bit more information about your options. July 10th is the Fourth Creek Brewers Fest. It's all Knoxville, Knox County brewers only. We're not going to have people coming in from Colorado's and California's bringing their beers in. It's the best beer that KUB Water can make. That's the joke we're working with. I'm sticking to it. Come out, check that out. It's at 124 South North Shore Drive. That's Union Jacks, E-Vape West, Harper's Bicycles, that kind of stuff. Or you can go online at evapelongeknox.com to find a link there for some more information about it. I'm on vacation, so we've got a show that's coming out on Sunday, but after that we're going to be on a little bit of a hiatus. But when I come back, it'll be the rest of the city council candidates. Like I said, I'm going to try to get Mammoth and the baseball team back in. Have a great day. Oh, stop that one.